Welcome back, people. You're listening to The Introverted Nerd Watches. I am your host, Reese, and it's Throwback Thursday, so it's time for some more Saved by the Bell. And this week, I watched Season 4, Episode 17, S.A.Ts. I freaking... Do I love this episode? This episode is like... It's just like proof. Like proof positive. Like it's a whole episode that shows you why nobody should be friends with Jesse or Zach. Mostly Jesse, but I think it combines the worst of both of them. Now this is not the first episode to do that, but you know, I mean, just in case, like every once in a while they remind you that Zach ain't shit, but Jessie is also a problem. Like she ain't shit either, which is, you know, I used to question why Jessie and Zach were best friends, but now I'm like, of course, they're both the worst. That's why they're friends. That is why they will always have one friend. They will always have one friend in each other. So this is why, you know, I always question, like, how does Zach still have friends? How is he not like a pariah? And it's because Jesse exists. Jesse is his soulmate. You know, people think that it's Kelly. Nope. No. It is Jesse. Jesse is Zach's soulmate. They're practically the same person. Yeah. So before we get into the S.A.Ts, let me just say that it is International Podcast Day as I'm recording this. Full disclosure, you can see behind the curtain. I'm recording this on a Sunday, International Podcast Day. So in honor of that, you should subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, wherever you get your podcast. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts and Stitcher. You can leave me a review on Apple, a 5-star review. And I will be eternally grateful because, you know, I'm that kind of person. I will just be grateful. And you should follow me on the socials because I'm always good there. I always have a ton of vitriol and I'm not that bad. I'm not a vitriolic person. I'm not a keyboard warrior like some people are on Twitter, but whatever. I live tweet stuff and I make fun of everything. So follow me on Twitter. I'm at NerdTrovertPod. On Instagram, I'm at TheIntrovertedNerd. And like the Facebook page at facebook.com/TheIntrovertedNerd. And all of this stuff will be in the notes for the show. So just click on that and you should find links and stuff in there to everything. So let's get into the S.A.Ts, y'all, because it's the worst. Like, Zach is like, he gets rewarded for doing nothing, basically. It's not enough that Zach is like the most popular kid in school. He's, you know, good looking if you like that super blonde, beachy guy kind of thing. He's not my type, but if he's yours, he's good looking. He's rich. He has a cell phone when nobody else does. And now they think he's a genius. So it's S.A.T time. And they make it clear that these people are not like seniors in high school. They're juniors. So, I mean, is this like the regular S.A.Ts or is this just like a practice S.A.T, like PSATs? Because it's a Saturday morning, Mr. Belding and, you know, some generic S.A.T guy are in the gym with desks on a Saturday morning. The whole gang is there, and Mr. Belding comes in, and he's like on 11, and he's like, this is so important. This test, the S.A.Ts, and he on the blackboard they actually explain what S.A.T stands for, standardized something test. It's not academic. I forget what. I wasn't paying attention. They write down what SATs I can't speak. What S.A.T actually stands for, and Mr. Belding is being the worst because on the one hand, he's saying, this is a very important test. This will determine your future. And then he goes, but no pressure, just take this test that is going to determine, you have to get a good score because it'll determine everything that'll happen in your future. Like if you're a doctor or a janitor, and not that there's anything wrong with being a janitor, but I'm just saying that's the way he's talking about it. And it's like, dude, how do you finish that speech, that, fire and brimstone speech about how this is going to determine your future, and then say, no pressure. And Zach is the only one that takes it like to heart. Like Zach doesn't care about this test at all. He walks in late. He's not about it. And I'm like, well, like you can't really judge anything by Zach. But I was thinking, like, if Zach is not taking this seriously, this is obviously not very important. Like he doesn't think that this determines his future. Like when Zach has a test to take, when he thinks there's something like important in it for him at the end, and like the end game, he can, he can scheme, but he can also take those things kind of seriously. Like he'll cheat, but that's how he's taking it seriously, because he cheats. And he's not cheating here. He doesn't want to go. He's talking about going to the beach. And then he sees some like kind of pretty blonde girl. She looks kind of like, the chick that plays Marsha Brady in like the Brady Bunch movies. Not OG Marsha Brady, but new Marsha Brady that's married to Ben Stiller, or was married to Ben Stiller. I think those two got divorced. Ooh, R.I.P.D. to that relationship. So he sees her and he only sees the back of her head, and Zach's like, his dick's hard. And it's like, really? All you have to do is see blonde hair and you're like you're about it. You want to stay for this test. So, he stays, he takes the test. We see a little, like, they go through what everybody's thinking. Lisa is also super dressed up for the test. She has on like, what is it called? She like a sleeveless, sort of like bustier type thing. So she got like super nicely dressed for this like Saturday morning test. Screech is being annoying Screech, and he's like sharpening his pencil when everybody's supposed to be quiet. Jessie, of course, is like completely neurotic, and she's freaking out. In her head, she doesn't, and that's what we're hearing. We're hearing like what's going on in their heads. Kelly is also another one that's kind of freaking out. She's like, she sees that Jessie is like on the third page or something like that. And she's like, oh shit, Jessie's on the third page. And it's like, well, Kelly, I mean, that Jessie is like kind of a smarty pants. So, stop looking over at her. You pay attention to your own test. And I don't know what they do for Slater. Slater probably has just like buzzing going on in his head or something, because he's a jock and they like to pretend that he's stupid or something. I don't think that's what happened, but I can't remember. So we go forward like several weeks, and they're all sitting in the Max, and they're all going to like read their scores together. And James is back. James, the British actor, who James is like, we have to talk about James for a second. I have to talk about James for a second, because James makes me sad, kind of, because he is like, I'm going to say mid 40s. Okay, I'm going to be kind and say early 40s. But James is early 40 years old. He's working in the Max as a waiter. No problem with being a waiter. But it's like, dude, should you, and when he's talking, the kids are all excited to see him, which I'm happy about. I'm happy to see not Max, James too, but it's like, he's telling them the story about why he's back. He was working in like some community theater play. And it's like, really, if you're still doing community theater, maybe it's about time to give up the dream of acting. I'm just saying, I mean, I know somebody is going to tell me that some actor didn't get discovered until they were like in their 40s, which is all well and good. That's like cool. But James is not that guy. I mean, we've seen James act. He ain't it. He's not about to be discovered. So maybe it's time for James to move on. I want to know if James has like a family. He probably doesn't though, right? That's why he can work at the Max, because this is not even a good waiter job. Like if he had a better waiter job, I would feel kind of better about him. You live in California, my guy. There's a ton of good restaurants around. Why are you here with these kids that probably don't even tip? Like I've never seen anybody on this show leave a tip at the Max. So, I mean, when Kelly was working at the Max, or when they show Kelly working at the Max, they talk about tips sometimes, but you never see any of these kids, like any of our main group. We never see them leaving a tip. So I'm just saying, I'm worrying about James' well-being. I'm a kind person. I worry about these things. So any old way. So they're going through, everybody except Zach is nervous about opening their S.A.T scores. And the first person to open is Screech. Screech gets somewhere in like the mid 1200s. He's happy with it. Kelly gets an 1100. She's cool with that. Lisa gets an 1140, and I was like, oh, thank God. Lisa is not like the lowest. Because I couldn't remember from like when I was a kid, like what Lisa's score was. So I was like, oh, thank you. You didn't make the black girl the dummy. Slater gets a 1060, and he's kind of salty about that, but he moves on kind of fast because he's like, yeah, I got these dimples. I look good. I don't even care about, I'm going to get a scholarship. I don't have to worry about being smart. So he's fine. And so here we go to Jessie makes it clear she wants to go last. She's too nervous. And so Zach is like, you know what, Screech, I don't care about this enough to even like pick up this envelope to open it. So here, you open it. And Screech opens his envelope and reads it. And the first number he says is like, oh, 760, 765. And everybody's like, ooh. But then he reads the other score and it's like a whatever it is, to add up to 1502. Zach got a 1502 on the SATs. We got to talk about this score, you guys, because is that even possible? Okay, full disclosure, I did not take the SATs. When I got out of high school, I was just like, I threw up the middle fingers. I was just like, fuck this shit. And I was like, I did whatever for the next few years. I didn't go to college until I was in my 20s. So, that was my thing. I didn't have to take the SATs. I took, an entrance exam to get into the college and whatever. That's my story. So I don't know, but I do remember, I know the SAT scoring is different now. It goes up to like 2,200 or something like that now. But back then, during that time, is 1502 even possible? Because I thought that the score was counted in tens. So I'm like, is this the score he can get is like either a 1500 or a 1510. It can't be like one of the numbers in between. It has to be like an integral of 10, right? I mean, I might be wrong, and this is Saved by the Bell, so I'm not doing like mountains of research for this shit. I'll let other people do that. If you want to do that and like tell me on Twitter, at NerdTraverPod. So, but I'm like, is that even possible? And why 1502? Why not just regular old 1500 or, 1510, 1550, 15 whatever? Why 1502? Why stop there? Like, what do you need those 2 extra points for? I don't get it. But Jesse's score is just as wacky. So when everybody's impressed, Screech is like, we all thought Zach was a dumbass, but, it proves that you don't have to work that hard, to get a good score in the SATs. You can just be, you can be Zach. You can do nothing. You can be lazy for, most of the school year and just come out, take this test, and boom, get a 1500 or 1502. It's so stupid too, because they spend the rest of the episode saying Zach got a 1500 on the SAT. So it's like, you could have just said 1500. Those 2 points didn't matter. I'm sorry, but I'm upset. I'm going to calm down. This is not a big deal, but it just made me mad because everybody keeps saying Zach got a 1500 on his SATs, and whatever. I'm not going to cry. I'm just going to move past this because deep breath, move past it. So everybody's impressed by Zach, and then it's like, oh, Jesse. Everybody's like starts pumping Jesse up because they're like, Jesse, if Zach got a 1500, you must have scored off the charts because we know how dumb his ass is. So Jesse's like really excited. She's letting them pump her up, and she opens hers, and Jesse got a 1205. What? 1205. It's lower than Screech, which I'm kind of like, that seems like about right to me, because Screech built a robot. Screech is always set up as like the genius, the smartest person in the group. Jessie is more, she's set up as the good student, the joiner, the person that's, president of the student council. She's in every club. She's that kind of student. Not that she's not, smart, but she's never been set up as the genius. She's been set up as the person that works really hard and gets good grades. Screech has been set up as the genius. So it does make sense to me that Screech would get the higher score, but I digress. And then, so Jessie is like freaking out. She's like, what the hell? What the hell is going on here? She runs out. Everybody is like trying to comfort her, I guess. But she, she's not trying to hear that shit. She got a 1205. It's embarrassing. And so we go to school the next day, and everybody knows that Zach got the highest score. Mr. Belding actually announces over during like morning announcements that Zach got the highest score in school. And isn't that like personal information? Like, you're not allowed to give out students grades and shit like that. Whatever. Mr. Belding has never been known as a great teacher or a great administrator. So the fact that he's like doing something that he's not supposed to be doing is about right. So yeah, Mr. Belding, consistent. Blonde chick that was sitting in front of Zach, her name is Heather. She's really impressed that Zach got such a high score. And she wants to study with him. And I don't know, I should have known that something was up because Zach usually goes after the brunettes, the Kelly and her clones, as I like to call them. So the fact that it's a blonde girl should be, the signal up front that she's not really that important, but she got a name, so good for that actor. Her name's Heather, and she wants to study with Zach, so she's going over to his house and after school, whatever. And so we see Jesse, and Jesse's being a dick. Like, Jesse is being a real, top flight asshole. So Lisa and Kelly are trying to make her feel better, telling her that a 1205 isn't that bad. I believe this is when Kelly says that, they have a whole year. Take this S.A.T score was not that important. They have a whole nother year. They're only juniors. And I forget what they say, but they mentioned their scores, and she was, Kelly or Lisa says, you got higher scores than us, and we're fine with the scores we got, and you got even higher than us. That's like a good thing. And this is when Jessie goes Zach, and she's like, oh yeah, of course I got, higher scores than you. And she's basically starts calling them stupid and is just insulting the shit out of them. She's like, yeah, I got a 1205. You guys are cheerleaders and you got, whatever scores you got. And it's like, what? Like, here go your two best friends, your only two friends, or your only two girlfriends. And they're standing here making you feel better when you got higher scores on the SATs than they did. But they're here trying to pick your ass up. And the only thing you can do, Jessie, is insult them and call them, smart for cheerleaders. And Jessie's the worst. She's such a fucking asshole. She's the worst. She sucks. So after, while all this is going on, they tell Jessie, walk away, chick, before we get into that ass, because we're not going to stand here and be insulted by you. And so after they leave, Zach gets called to Belding's office, and he tells Zach, like, yo, I didn't know you were this smart. You've been here all this time, and I thought that you were just a bad student, but it turns out you just weren't being challenged. So he gives Zach an entirely new schedule. Like, what? Like, okay, when are the SATs taken in the school year? They have to be taken... I mean, see, since this is not the real SATs, since they're not applying to college after this, it's hard to know. But you think that if you're applying to college, the SATs would be taken sometime in like October or November or something like that. So I'm guessing that's the time of year this is. This doesn't matter, but this is what I do. So if you're mad at me about this, get over it and just follow along with my logic. So I'm guessing we're in like October or November of the school year. So Zach has been in school. If they go back to school in September, he's been in school for like a month and a half, probably 2 months. And he's been doing this regular schedule. So he has to go, he's 2 months behind into this new schedule that Mr. Belding is giving him. And he's giving him like college level math courses and Russian. Like, what? Like, how is taking Russian like a smart person's class? I get it. Russian seems like a hard language to learn, but is Russian, like, even back then, was Russian the language that you wanted to learn. Like, I feel like even in the early 90s, the late 80s, early 90s, you would still want to take Spanish or Chinese, or, just something like that. Like, Russian just seems really random. But whatever, Mr. Belding supposedly knows best. And so he puts Zach in all of these classes, and Zach is like freaking out because he's like, I'm in the classes with all the nerds. He tells them I'm going to have 6 hours of homework a night. And Mr. Belding is like all about it. And I can't believe that Mr. Belding is really on Zach's dick about this. Like, he acts like he did something. Like, he's never been Zach's teacher. Like, I mean, we've seen Mr. Belding teach like a couple of classes. Like, he was teaching a photography class and shit like that. Like, that's not important. That's like an elective type shit. He wasn't teaching the important classes, the science, English, math, shit that you really need. No offense to all the photographers out there, but I'm just saying, photography is an elective. It is not one of your like main courses. So Mr. Belding has not been a part of the learning process for Zach. So he's walking around taking all the fucking credit. Like, he's acting like he and Zach are buddies. There's a college, like, what do they call it? I forget where they invite all of these colleges to the school so that, the kids can go around and get applications and everything. What is it called? The college forum, I forget what it's called. But whatever, you know what I'm talking about, right? And so they're doing that, and Zach goes in, and this is when we learn that Jesse, the only school Jesse has ever wanted to go to, is Stansbury. Now, Stansbury, it's supposed to be Stanford. I don't have any idea why they couldn't just say Stanford. This is a school in California. The show is all about California. I don't understand why they couldn't just say Stanford. Like, Stanbury is so stupid. And it's even stupider because they mention Harvard. So Harvard is a real school, and this like, Harvard University didn't mind being mentioned on Saved by the Bell, but Stanford is like, nah, fuck that shit. We want to be like, you can't mention the name of our school on your like dinky little TV show. Make up a new name, and they make up Stansbury. Oh, why not just pick another school? Pick USC, UCLA, Berkeley. The Elizabeth Berkeley is her name, but like, pick Berkeley. That's what you do. Like, come on. Whatever. So, the lady from Stansbury, her name is Helen. I don't know why. Why do I know that lady's name? Anyway, her name's Helen, and she's the recruiter. That's what it is. She's the recruiter from Stansbury. And there's a line for Stansbury, and Heather and Jesse and Zach are all in line, and Mr. Belding just like pushes them out of the way. Like, here, talk to Zach. Zach got the highest score in the SATs in this school, or like in the state or something like that. And, he pushes him to the front of the line, and he's like, telling this lady all the good things about Zach. And it's like, what good things? Like, Zach's not a particularly good student, so the only thing he can talk about is his SAT score. He doesn't get great grades. So, but the lady, when she hears his SAT score, she's like, oh, Zach, like, oh, this is amazing. Like, she's like, whatever. I'm sure there are other students in the state of California who have gotten an SAT score that's comparable to Zach, and also they have good grades. But everybody's super impressed by this 1502. And then Mr. Belding like notices Jesse. He's like, oh, you can, talk to Jessica Spano too. She's a good student, and, blah, blah, blah. But Zach is the real star here, right? And that's basically what he does. And then he walks away. And Helen, the Stansbury recruiter, is like, oh, Jesse, what grade did you get on the SATs? And Jesse has to tell her, like, 1205, but I'm, the captain of, the debate squad, and I'm the president of whatever. And Helen, this bitch Helen, who I'm like, on one hand, I'm kind of happy that she like put Jesse in her place. But on the other hand, I'm like, how are you an educator? How do you work for a college? Because what she does is when Jesse says she got a 1205, Helen is like, oh, a 1205. Really? Well, Jesse, there are other schools that would be perfectly happy to have a student like you who got a 1205 on her SATs. And she, basically, and she just ignores her to talk to Zach. And I'm like, really, Helen? Like, that's what you do? Like, to a student's face, you tell her, you got a 1205 on your SATs. We don't fuck with people that get 1205s. You're a good student, probably got straight A's in a ton of clubs, but no, you're not good enough. And it's like, do you really say that to a student's face? Like, Helen didn't even pretend that they were going to take Jesse seriously. She was just like, oh, like she was almost disgusted. Like, ew. Like her face of disgust when Jesse said she got a 1205 was like, how dare you, you dirty student with your stupid 1205 come over here to Stansbury and insult me by thinking that you're good enough to come to this fake school. And it's like, get the fuck out of here, Helen. Oh, it was just the disgust on her face was kind of funny though. And Jesse was being like an asshole through this entire episode. So I was like glad that she got she got taken down a notch. So the little things make me happy, you guys. So this completely crushes Jesse's world. And she's like, she just goes basically fuck everything. She quits all of the her extracurricular activities. She even gives back her hall pass. And it's like, do people get permanent hall passes? Was that like a thing? I don't remember there ever being like a permanent hall pass. I remember you had to ask the teacher every time you wanted to leave class for a hall pass, but there was no permanent hall pass. But I don't know, Bayside is a magical school, so but Jessie had one. She had a permanent hall pass, but she even gave that back. And she's just like, Mr. Belding, after he completely ignored her and has been like big upping Zach, is finally noticing that he has other students in this school and that he shouldn't just be like super focused on Zach, because you don't get anything. Like, the school doesn't get anything for Zach's 1502. There's nothing special. I don't even like, you wouldn't even get, would you even get a write-up in like a newspaper for something like that? Like, I feel like we only hear when students get perfect scores on the SATs. We don't hear about the random student that got like a really good score, like Zach's 1502. You don't hear about those randos. You hear about the kids that are like genius level and get perfect scores. So, but that's also not Jessie. So she's got problems, and she basically did quit everything but school. Like, she's only coming to school because, like, where are Jessie's parents? Where's her mom? Is she with her, like, her new husband and the stepbrother? Because the fact that Jessie is spiraling this hard over an SAT score that that doesn't really matter, and that she can probably take again the next year, because that's when you're going to apply to colleges. Like, come on. Whatever. I get so worked up about this stuff. So, Jessie's like spiraling. Her friends are worried. everybody except Zach, because Zach is a piece of shit and he doesn't care about anybody but himself. And Heather, so he calls Heather. Heather's coming over to his house, and he like dims the lights and he's putting on cologne. And so Heather comes into his room and she's like, so should the lights really be this low? Like, what are we doing here? And you can tell, like, right off the bat that Heather actually wanted to study. Like, she was not flirting with Zach. She actually thought that Zach could help her. I don't know why. Like, this is one test. The SATs is one test, and all of a sudden, people want to study with Zach. They think he's a genius, but okay. So she's like, so let's get to studying. I want to actually study here, Zach. And he tells her no, and he's being like a creep, like really creepy. So the lights are already low, like dimmed. And then he tells her, in order to, really have your mind working, you have to like relax so your brain can absorb, the education. And he tells her that he needs to massage her back. And I'm like, ew, like, no, ew, Zach, you're nasty. Stop it. Like, clearly this girl did not come over here to be on a date. She's not here to flirt with you. She actually wants to study. But then he gets cock blocked real hard because Kelly is the first person that knocks on the door, and she tells him, even though Jesse has a boyfriend and Slater that she could be going to, she chooses to go to Zach. And she tells Zach, how bad Jesse is doing and they need her help and they need his help. But he's like, fuck all that shit. I got a girl here. I'm not trying to hear that. Tell Jesse to, feel better. And he slams the door in her face because he's a terrible friend. And then he gets another knock on the door while he's still being a creeper and trying to massage Heather. Heather's boyfriend comes. Heather's, 45-year-old boyfriend, Todd, shows up to study with them because smart Heather, who I didn't care about, like, in the beginning of this episode, but who I love now, has a boyfriend, invited him over to also study with Zach. So I'm like, yes, Heather, come. Yeah, like, Heather is my girl. I love Heather because... Oh, it was so funny. It was so great for Zach, for once, to not get what he wanted. But I guess he was just like, ooh, fuck that. Heather, you're not trying to fuck, so you got to get out. And the next scene is him going to the Max to talk to everybody about Jesse. And instead of any of them going to actually talk to Jesse, they recruit James to come up with a plan to trick Helen from Stansbury into recruiting Jesse. And it's like, oh my God, you guys, you're all old enough to use your words. Just fucking talk to her. And better yet, go talk to her mom and tell her mom that she needs help. But no, because Jesse, like, if you thought Jesse was bad before, Helen from Stansbury comes to the Max, and Jesse thinks that she's there to talk to her, but she's actually there to talk to Slater. And so they go and talk, and this is when we find out Helen's name, because Helen told Slater to call her Helen. So they offer Slater an athletic scholarship, and she's basically like, you're a fucking idiot. How could they recruit you? And I'm like, fuck you, Jesse. Like, this is your boyfriend. Like, you go out with him. You have sex with him. Like, what the fuck are you talking? Like, how are you calling your boyfriend stupid? But Slater is Slater, and he doesn't care, and he's like more worried. Like, this is the one time I'm like kind of on Slater's side, because he's more worried about her than he is about his his own education. Like, he should be happy. He just got offered a full scholarship to Stansbury. Like, come on. But Jessie is so fucking self-centered. She doesn't even care. She's like, fuck that. My boyfriend's an idiot. But he gets into the school and she's just, she's full freak out mode. So they go back to the recruiting, because how long is this college recruiting thing going on at Bayside? But I don't know. This is like day 2, 3, something like that. So they go back and they set up a table for James so he can pretend that he's a recruiter from Harvard. And they do a whole thing where they don't want Jessie to find out. They just want James to talk up Jessie to Helen from Stansbury, so that she's so interested in Jessie that she tries to recruit her. And because they're the dumbest adults in the world, James, who is being so fucking over the top, and this was actually kind of hilarious because this is the first time in the episode where we see Mark Paul Gosselaar kind of break character, because James is like being over the top James with his British accent, and he's like he's speaking so much that he's like losing his breath, and he's yelling at Helen, and Helen is like, Helen, when she first sees him, she's like really surprised that Harvard is there, and he's like, yes, Harvard is here. We're trying to recruit Jessica Spano. And she's like, oh, like Helen is like really impressed. You know, she's trying to get in good with the people from Harvard for some reason, because it's like, you work at Stansbury. That's supposedly a good school, but I guess Harvard is Harvard and everybody wants to be at Harvard. But she tells James, like, we like to consider Stansbury the Harvard of the West. And James cuts that shit off so fast. It is kind of hilarious. Like, I laughed out loud when he's like, nah, bitch. Harvard, there's only one Harvard. Like, your school is not even on our level. Like, how dare you insult us by calling your school the Harvard of the West? Like, I spit on that. And Helen is like, Helen is put in her place. But James is like, nobody can stop him. He's keeps going on and on. Zach is trying to get him to wrap it up. And this is when he breaks, where Mark Paul breaks a little bit and he starts actually laughing. But the plan works in that it convinces Helen to recruit Jessie. But because James was so like over the top, he stayed there too long, and he actually runs into Jessie. And Jessie goes over to the Stansbury table, and Helen is trying to recruit her. And then she sort of, through what Helen says, she tries to she figures everything out, and she tells Helen, like, you know, if you didn't want me until you thought Harvard wanted me, then I don't want to be at your school. And it's like, Jessie, swallow that pride. You know you want to go to Stansbury. Just accept what the lady is giving you and take your ass to Stansbury. But she doesn't do it. She just walks out. And if that wasn't like crazy enough, Slater also tells Helen from Stansbury that he is going to give back his full scholarship. You know, he doesn't want to go to Stansbury either. And I'm like, what? Have we spoken to Major Slater about this? Because I feel like Major Slater would be like, nah, son, we are not giving back full scholarships just because you have a girlfriend right now. You're not even going to remember this chick after high school. You're not going to remember this chick next year. You're taking that scholarship. Forget about Jessie. Let her do whatever she wants. You're going to Stansbury, AC Slater, Albert Clifford. You're not going to be following this girl out here. So, but Slater walks out and give him back his full scholarship. And James's job is not done because Zach wants his old schedule back. So he takes, this is so ridiculous. And Mr. Belding is like an idiot. So he takes James to Mr. Belding's office, and he makes James pretend to be the chairman of the S.A.T board, and he tells Mr. Belding that his name is Stanley Allen Taylor, S.A.T, and he's the chairman of the S.A.T board, and he's been going around to all the schools where kids have scored higher than a 1500 on the SATs. And he's been making sure that, stupid administrators don't change their schedules, thinking that if they, pile up on their classes that they're helping them. So he basically is like, you give Zach a break. You don't, pile up on his classes. His mind needs to rest. And Mr. Belding, I was like, Mr. Belding, you have met this man before. He has met James before. He met James when James was first pretending to be Zach's dad. Like, he knows James. And then all through this scene, James's fake beard is coming off. And this is the second time Mark Paul breaks, because James turns around to him and the beard completely falls off. And Mark Paul actually laughs. But Mr. Belding doesn't notice because he's too stupid. And he's like chastised enough that he gives Zach his old schedule back and everything is fine. He doesn't notice that James's beard is hanging off his face. Like, it's a terrible beard, and Mr. Belding should have noticed this, but whatever. Everything works out for Zach because Zach is Zach, and of course everything works out. So he leaves. He goes out into the hallway. Jessie is standing outside of Mr. Belding's office, and she and Zach hug it out because she tells Zach, I know what you did. And they hug it out because they are both terrible, and they decide that, they're best friends. So that's the end. Zach and Jessie suck, but they love each other. So everything is fine. And that's the end of the episode, you guys. Oh my God. James is back. That's probably the best thing. Like, over the top James, who made Mark Paul break 2 times in this episode. He is back for us. Now, I don't know if James ever comes back after this. Like, I can't remember off the top of my head. Hopefully he does come back. Hopefully Zach has another scheme where he needs James to pretend to be somebody else, because of course Mr. Belding is like phase blind, and he can't recognize a person that he's seen before. So he can bring James back like anytime to be whoever he wants, and Mr. Belding will never recognize him. So yeah. That is the end. And coming up next week, I believe, is the first Palm Springs episode. I might be lying, but I don't have it in front of me, but I believe it's the first Palm Springs episode. So that ought to be fun. And what's going on? I have the last episode of Fear the Walking Dead coming up for the podcast. If you've been listening to that, you know that I'm not coming back for the 5th season. I haven't enjoyed this season, so tune in for my farewell tour for Fear the Walking Dead. I'm reviewing this season of The Gifted. That show is everything, so listen to that. I believe those episodes are going to drop on Friday. Fear the Walking Dead comes out on Tuesday, and The Gifted comes out on Friday, but I'm not sure. I'm not exactly positive, but I believe it comes out on Friday. So be looking out for that. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast. And If you want to send me feedback about any of these shows, send it to TheIntrovertedNerd@gmail.com. If you want to listen to my back episodes, because I know some people have been having problems listening to all of the back episodes. So you can search for the show on Libsyn. All of the episodes are there, or you can go to TheIntrovertedNerd.com and you can listen to my whole back catalog there. Black Lightning and all of the full Saved by the Bell rewatch. So yeah, and all of this will be in the show notes. So click on that and you'll see everything. So until the next episode, everybody, bye.